Welcome, Erica Elliott, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have you on today. We're going to be talking about your work as a physician and a consultant. And the way you do it is going to be unique. It's going to be in a way of old school rather than the modern way of living. And I just love that because I like to think I'm traditional and I do like old school music and things along those lines. If I look back at what we had, I'm not saying that it was better, but it was different. In your own words, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
I'm Erica Elliott, and I've done a lot of different things with my life. And I came to medicine later than most people because I had a lot I wanted to do before I dove into medicine. Because once you're in the world of medicine, that's your whole life practically. And I mean, it's a huge commitment. When I chose medicine, it was the purpose in my life. It took me 10 years of searching to find what my purpose in life was. And I finally realized it was medicine. And it's funny, it took me 10 years because it was my destiny to be a doctor because I come from a whole lineage of doctors on the Swiss side of the family. But I didn't want to just do whatever my ancestors did and my grandfather and my uncle. I wanted to find my own way, but it did lead me in the end, after all these wonderful, exciting adventures, which I write about in this book, from mountains to medicine, scaling the heights in search of my calling. So when I began in medicine, I gradually realized something wasn't right, but I didn't know why. I felt I was learning some of the things I was learning weren't true. But why would they teach us something that wasn't true? The professors obviously believed in what they were teaching, but where did the professors get their knowledge? Like, for example, saying that this was back in 1979 and 80. I think things have changed since then, but telling us that lifestyle didn't matter. I knew that was a crock. And what you ate didn't matter. And even if you were a slug and didn't do any exercise at all, it didn't matter. Didn't matter if you didn't get any sunlight during the day. I mean, I smelled a rat, but I didn't know how to put it together. And then about the cholesterol business and how saturated fats cause heart disease. And I said, something's wrong here because like when I in my 10-year search, I spent some time as a school teacher on the Navajo Reservation, and I learned Navajo, and it opened up a whole world for me. I wrote about it in my first book, and I could take a deep dive into Navajo life because they accepted me. They ate pure saturated stuff. I mean, they cooked with lard. How saturated can you get? And ate their mutton and so forth. Back in those days, before there were junk food on the reservation, people didn't get heart disease and they didn't get diabetes. It was when the junk food companies came to the reservation and they stopped eating their traditional food and they cooked with Crisco and all these awful things. And then they have really high rate of diabetes and heart disease and hypertension now. And so having that experience, I thought, why are they attacking saturated fats? And it doesn't make sense. And anyway, there's a lot of things that were puzzling. And it was only years later, like decades later, I found out how modern medicine began. It was a merger between with Rockefeller and his oil and the pharmaceutical industry because he was looking for new ways to use the oil so he could continue making tons of money. And the pharmaceutical industry could make medications out of petroleum-based products. And then they went on to figure out how they could dominate this new medical system. And so they villainized and wiped out much of alternative medicine, like the herbalists and acupuncture and homeopathy and so forth, so they could dominate. And so all our education had an agenda. Anything that would promote more drugs was pushed. And what shocked me is, why didn't the professors, have critical thinking? It was like nobody seemed to have critical thinking when I was there. So the whole time I was wondering, what is going on here? But there are parts of it I adored, where there was no politics, no money involved, like anatomy and physiology. I just adored all that stuff. But as soon as there was some vested interest in us learning wrong information, that was very discouraging. But then I'm a former athlete and climbed lots of big mountains, done first ascents and stuff, which is talked about in this book. And I was competitive. And so I decided I have to shut up and keep my mouth shut, go along with the program, because I wanted to excel. I wanted to be at the top of the class. That's how competitive I was. So in the process, I sort of lost my soul and went along with whatever their program was and spouted it myself and so forth. But I'm going to stop here to see if you have any questions.
Well, it's not so much of questions because typically in a podcast, it's more about a conversation where we talk about what was happening because what you laid out was foundation. It's the foundation for our conversation now. And it's interesting because you said so many topics that many people might be aware of, but they don't focus on. Think of it as the aspect of critical thinking in schools where critical thinking is gone now, or the aspect of why are we having, fast food on every corner and all of the junk foods in our households, in our schools, etc. Why are big conglomerates like, Rockefellers and things along those lines impeding into our daily lives in order to make a buck? And we can see that even with the medical industry in our recent times with what Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson and Johnson, Bill Gates. I mean, all of these companies have made billions of dollars off the taxpayers. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the bigger picture? We have to ask ourselves, why not good health? Do they want everyone to just live until maybe they're 65? And, that's when they're all checked out because they worked, they did the American dream, they worked 9 to 5 all the way up until 65. And now they're not happy. Where's life? Where does life begin? So the question that I would like to, go down is greed the center of everything? Is it the root of all evil when it comes to taking away our natural medicine, our herbalism, our acupuncture, etc.? Or is it something that we might not be paying attention to, like a bigger picture?
Okay, I love what you said because it's so relevant. I think there's three agendas going on. One is eugenics, like Bill Gates, is to decrease the population. One is control, like the FBI, CIA, and so forth, controlling us. And the other that sort of predominates is pure greed. And it's destroying us. And so what in the late 70s and early 80s, I was experiencing sort of a prelude to what we're experiencing now, a small version of what's going on now, which is absolutely horrendous. So I just want to tell you what happened to me, because I was betraying my soul when I was in my medical training, just going along with it. But a little voice said the whole time, this isn't right. And this is not what you look 10 years for. You're not really helping patients get well. And so, but mainstream medicine had so villainized people who practice out of mainstream and called them quacks and so forth. I thought, well, maybe I'm just stuck doing this. And then I thought, this is so unrewarding. I feel like a prostitute. I feel like I'm on the wrong path. But then it took a disaster to get me on my path. And that's sort of the theme throughout my life. All these terrible things that have happened to me have been an absolute godsend. So this is the terrible thing that happened to me related to medicine. When I had my son, I was a single mother, and I had to have a regular schedule. I couldn't be delivering babies all night and stuff. I needed to be there for him and have a predictable schedule and not be on call. And so I sold my soul to the devil and signed up to work in a corporate medical clinic, meaning now most medicine is corporatized, but these were one of the first clinics that were were corporate, and all they cared about is making money. I mean, I remember the supervising physician asking to talk to me, and after I'd been there for about 6 months, and he said, "I've got good news and bad news for you. Which do you want to hear first?" And I said, "Well, maybe the good news." And he said, "The good news is you're the only physician in the entire," I'm not going to say the name of it because I could get sued. So, but it's a chain of corporate clinics. And you're the only one in the whole chain of these clinics who doesn't have a single complaint filed against them, not one. And you're the only one. I said, "Gosh, well, what's the bad news?" And he said, "The bad news is we can't give you a raise because you're not seeing enough patients at a time." Well, I said, "Well, that's how I probably don't have any complaints about me because I try to do a good job." And he said, "No, you need to see about 4 patients an hour." What can you do of any significance except ask a few questions, run a bunch of tests, like lots of tests, and give drugs? You can't do much of anything meaningful. Okay, it was just killing my soul, but I didn't know what to do because I needed the income to live life and so forth. And then disaster struck. Thank God. So it was a very toxic building, and it was a brand new building, all these chemicals outgassing. And I was near the procedure room where all the disinfectants the fumes would seep into my room. So every plant I brought in there died after a few days from the formaldehyde fumes. And they had air fresheners, which are total poison, in the bathrooms, and they had windows that didn't open. And every month I felt like I had the flu, and I kept a diary because I didn't know what in the world was happening to me. And I mean, everybody else was affected, but I was affected worse because of where I was located in the building. And also genetically, I found out years later when I was trying to get myself well and study environmental medicine. I studied genetically. The genetic test showed that I can't clear petroleum-based products, which are almost every toxin is, and properly. And so that added to my terrible reactions. And so in my diary, once a month, I felt like I had the flu, but no fever. Well, it turns out the janitor sprayed pesticides once a month. And it was a kind of pesticide that's now been banned for indoor use because they had thousands and thousands of complaints, especially parents of children who used it in their home, that the parents, and she's showing brain damage. That's what was happening to me. I couldn't think properly. I felt like I had dementia. It was terrifying for me. And I was going down the tubes really fast, and I was covered with rashes and stuff, and my eyes were all blurry, and my balance was off. I'd bump into things. I was terrified. I had no way to understand this. My doctor training was useless, totally useless. We never learned anything about what's going on in modern world, like pesticides, other poisons, the diet, all that stuff we never learned the really important stuff. So then a patient that I was seeing in this little cramped room with no windows, he started talking to me, and I realized I couldn't really follow. I couldn't remember from one sentence to the next. And all of a sudden, he stopped what he's saying. He said, "Dr. Elliott, are you okay?" And then I felt like for the first time I was seen. somebody saw me, that I was a mess. And so I actually started to cry, and he put his arm around me. And then I told him my symptoms, and he said, Dr. Elliott, you have what's known as sick building syndrome. Again, I didn't know anything about this kind of thing. And he said, you've got to get out of here, because if you stay here, you're going to get to the point where it's not, your symptoms won't turn around. I said, how do you know all this? He said, because he had the same problem at a place where he worked, and he had a very hard time finding help. And he brought in the next appointment. He made an appointment to follow up just so he could check on me. And so he brought in a book that was written by an environmental physician who knew about all these toxic stuff. And I said, I'm too brain damaged to read it. And he said, just put it by your bed and just know that there are people out there who understand what's wrong with you, but you have to get out of here. And so I quit. And the supervising physician said, why are you quitting? I said, because I feel so terrible. He said, you look great. That's the problem with some of these people. You know, they have rosy cheeks from allergies and stuff, and they look really healthy. He said, well, we could put you in another clinic. I said, no, they're all toxic. I have to quit. I'm sorry. He just said, I think you're making a mistake. I said, I can't stay here. I'm getting worse and worse. Pretty soon I won't be able to function. And so I thought, my life is over. I'm finished. And I was just so depressed. I lay on the couch and cried. And I think, you know, how am I going to support my son? How I'm going to have to give up my house. I'm going to be homeless. And my mind went crazy. I'm going to be, you know, on the streets and stuff. And I was like that for a couple of days, and then a knock on the door. And I went to the door to answer it, and it was a former patient. And she said, can I have an appointment with you? I was so confused. I said, what? This is my home. How did you find my home? She said, well, you know, I asked a bunch of people and found you. And I said, but you want an appointment with me in my home? She said, yes. I said, but I'm brain damaged. She said, yes, we all know about it. Your nurse told your patients about what happened. I said, well, why do you want an appointment with me? She said, because I have the same thing you have, and I know you'll understand. So she came in, and that's how my private practice began, brain damaged. And she was so grateful that she had somebody who understood her, even though, you know, I didn't have any answers, but she was so desperate to have some physician acknowledge what she was going through. And she paid me. I said, you're paying me? I didn't do anything. She said, you don't understand. People like us, they never, they're written off as crazy. And so anyway, to make a long story short, I started getting well, and my house was built in a non-toxic way. And I became co-author of the book, of one of the first books that tell you how to build a non-toxic house. And I got well enough to go and study environmental medicine for a few years and get board certified. And pretty soon, my clinic in my home I had so many patients, I couldn't handle it. And I mean, it was just amazing. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm finally on my path in life. This is what I'm meant to be doing. This is what gives me joy. This is what I'm good at. This is so meaningful to me, to help people actually feel good, so they're actually not coming back every month for more pills. And I used all the aspects of healing that I had been exposed to, like from with the Navajos and all over the world where I'd gone in the Peace Corps in Ecuador. So I used many modalities and hardly any prescriptions. Sometimes you have to. And I was able to keep patients out of the hospital. I can't tell you how much joy it brought me, but it took a disaster, Michael, to get me where I needed to go. And I don't want to retire. Patients say, are you going to retire someday? I said, no, I'm going to do it till I drop dead. Because why would you tell somebody to retire when they love what they do?
Very true. It's interesting because our journeys in life, there's a lot of similarities because I used to be a teacher. And one of the epiphanies that I had when I was in my final year as a teacher was this is not it. I'm literally seeing the children on a conveyor belt just being built. And they're all the same. The imagination is stripped away, the parts that don't need to be there, the mindset that
Yeah,
doesn't need to be there, it's all thrown out. But
yeah,
yet this makes them who they are. It makes them
yes,
unique. It allows them to, finally reach some place in life where they can say, I found my place. But if they go down this path of conformity and following, their peers and associates,
yeah,
happiness is not going to be at the end of the road.
yeah.
We can hope. We can hope and say, you know what, things will work out, you'll find your way. But I can't tell you how many people they call me, they email me, they inquire about mindset coaching because they have so many limits within their mind.
Oh,
It's astounding how many people have become tainted in the way of limits and the idea that that they are capped at a certain level. Like this
yeah,
is who I am. I can't be
yeah,
anymore. My
yeah,
circumstance has defined me.
yes.
But it takes those brave individuals to come out and say, you know what? I'm not going to allow this to hold me down. I know it can be an anchor, but the moment we start to see that we're able to help people, then it's almost like that makes sense now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's very moving. Your story is very moving, and you're clearly on your path in life.
hmm
I
And I
can,
do, and I do my best to make it visible for everyone because not every path is going to be the same.
right.
Similar to how that person you said, asked you, "Are you okay?" I had I think he was a first grader, asked if I was okay, and it was like it was probably on one of the worst days of my life. And he
Oh,
just looked at me, and this first grader asked me, "Are you okay?" And it's interesting because all the teachers, they see me all day long, right? No one said anything to me. It's just a first grader. And it's astounding how a kid can see what an adult couldn't. And I said, at some point, people stop looking within people and they start looking at people. And at some point, they stop looking within themselves to who they want to be. It's almost like, well, I was told to be a lawyer, I was told to be a doctor, I was told to be happy, but what does that mean? Many people chase this grandiose dream that is not theirs. Why are so many people chasing something that doesn't belong to them?
I'm identifying totally with what you're saying. I was raised all over the world because of my father's work, and I, to survive, I mimicked people. Even in the first grade, when I was in England, the head mistress at the school I went to in the first grade, she told me I needed to drop my Yankee accent. I was 6 years old, and I needed to learn how to speak the Queen's English. Oh my God. So that was the beginning of a whole line of learning how to not be myself to survive. And so I wouldn't be bullied, I wouldn't be ostracized, I would be one of the group. Even though I really wasn't part of their group, at least I had some semblance of being part of something. So I learned how to speak the Queen's English. After I got really good at it, you couldn't tell that I was an American. And then we moved briefly to Texas. And my first day there was awful. It was, the school had already begun the school year. So that made it really embarrassing because everybody looks at the new kid and sizes them up. I was 7 years old, and I was in England. I learned how to be very polite. And so I said, hello, everyone. And this boy in the front row got out of his desk and walked up to me and said, "Are you a communist?" And I didn't know what a communist was. That wasn't the shtick in Europe when I
Mhm.
was there in England. But I knew I had to deny it adamantly. So I'm not a I'm not a communist. And he said, "Well, you're a foreigner." no, I'm not. I'm an American. So I went home and then I had to practice how to talk like a Texan and kind of dress like them. So this went on and on throughout my early years. It was really rough. It sounds glamorous moving around all the time, but when you're little and you go to the local schools and have to learn the way they talk or learn even their language, that's why I'm multilingual for survival. It took a very bad experience for me to break through and find out who I really am, my authentic self. It's just like I say, these disasters are so helpful, even though they feel like the end of the world, like it's so terrible. So when I went to college, I was coming from Germany, and it was just when the hippies started happening. So I wasn't there when all that started happening in the US. So when I arrived at college, it was a very, quote, progressive college, Antioch College. I couldn't even speak the lingo. Like, they'd ask me, have you ever dropped acid? I didn't know what they're talking about. Or did I smoke weed? I had no idea. And so I had to try really hard to, you know, I got rid of my mini skirt and my little purse and heels and went to the secondhand store and got a whole hippie outfit. So I looked like them. Then I had to learn the way they talk. And I tried everything there. I was trying to do what I did elsewhere, trying to adapt and mimic and stuff. So I tried junk food because in Europe they didn't have junk food then. And so I gorged on junk food. I smoked pot, which I didn't was horrible experience because I found out later why it was a horrible experience because genetically I don't clear the THC, so it makes me almost psychotic. And I tried LSD and psilocybin, just trying to fit in. And then I was terribly sleep deprived because my roommate had sex every night and I was too afraid to speak up. I thought they'd think I was a prude. I was trying so hard to fit in. Eventually, I became psychotic and had a breakdown. I felt like my life was completely meaningless and I was worthless and so forth. And I made a suicide attempt. I sat in front of the oven, turned on the gas, and nothing happened. And I thought, maybe the pilot light's out. So I lit a match, and the whole thing exploded. The house shook, and the guy from upstairs came down and said, he threw me in the shower and said, "You're trying to kill yourself, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I have to report you to the dean." I was forced to see a psychiatrist. It was the college psychiatrist. And I was so mortified and so full of shame. I couldn't even look at him. He was this very handsome Black man. He told me about his life. He was the first Black psychiatrist to graduate from the University of Zurich in Switzerland, where my mother went to school. And he was like no psychiatrist nowadays, no pills, not trying to fix me. He did something that I've never experienced up until then. I'd never experienced in my life. He treated me with total respect, and it was the first time I'd ever felt seen and heard in my life. And so, having that container that he held, I was able to solve my own problems and realize that I was not at all who I thought I was. Not at all. I was a completely different person. I ended up really liking who I was. I didn't know who I was until he helped me by just he'd ask me critical questions like he'd say, "Now, why do you think you're stupid?" Exactly. And then I give all these reasons and he'd say, "Well, what about what your professors say? They say you're brilliant." And I said, "Well, my family says I'm stupid." And he said, anyway, so he would ask these critical questions that made me reevaluate. And anyway, that's when my real life began. And it's thanks to the breakdown, thanks to being forced to see this psychiatrist who saved my life and transformed me completely. That's when my real life began. and preceded by disaster.
No, that's powerful. Some of the things I think about, when we're growing up, we do the things we do because we have to survive, right? We don't become, human and, we're born and, we can just walk and talk and, go hunt our own food and pick our own berries. We have to be dependent on somebody. So we are dependent on survival. Like we need our parent or guardian, our parent, whoever, to protect us, provide for us to a certain extent. And then we go into the world of, school, public schools. There's a different mindset for survival there. We have to be like everyone else. And if we don't, then we're outcasted. And we don't want to be outcasted because in our mind, if we are separated from the pack, we are going to be more prone and more likely to not make it through. We have this community mindset, which is a good thing. But when we put it in the societal aspect of things that you should be having, people dictate what you should be having, it becomes more difficult. And then we start to go off our path, as we were saying earlier. And I can't imagine if you did something that you hated every single day, what type of person that would make you. Yet people, they go to work every single day, they hate their job, they are in relationships that they hate, they don't like themselves when they look in the mirror, yet they just accept it. The more you are going through that, it's going to be more stress, more anxiety, more problems in your life until you start to address the root cause of everything. Oftentimes, we are the obstacle, we are the mountain, we are the person that's creating all of these different ideas in our mind. Because we can say, wait, why am I doing what everyone else is doing? I can do whatever I want because at the end of the day, you are in charge of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. Yet they can be influenced by outside forces. But we have to understand that if we want that to be consistent, we have to give the go. And many people, they give the go ahead. So they fall into this trap of giving away their thoughts to other people, giving away their emotions and their feelings, and doing the things that they're supposed to do, whether it be following the crowd, trying a certain type of substance, wearing certain types of clothes. This is what happens. They follow the trends. This is the mindset that we fall into, but it's not a mindset that we have to stay in. It's a mindset that we can always get out of. So we can have this obstacle, we can see it, but then we can say, you know what? I can overcome this obstacle. We can have a path that goes away from the crowd. Maybe it's going to be a more difficult and lonely road, but more people who do that have a more fulfilled life than the people who just kind of follow everyone and they don't find fulfillment. One of the main issues that people struggle with when they come see me is that they don't know their passions, they don't know their gifts, they don't have any level of fulfillment beyond maybe having a kid. And I mean, that's great and all, but life is more than just having a child or having children. What is going to be the long-term aspect? And one of the things I love to do, with the podcast is have people come on, share their story, and then to have the audience, inquire about their story because I can't tell you how many unique individuals have very similar mindsets. They go through the same and similar experiences. And sometimes you can feel so alone because you think you're by yourself. You think, the world has called you crazy and they looked at you as, some insane person. Yet there's going to be people who have gone through that, who have navigated and figured out what was true to them. Because I can be, I'm just going to use politics because I think it's the easiest. I could be a Democrat and I could be a Republican, right? It doesn't matter which one I am. The opposite side, I'm going to say, oh, they're bad, they're evil, they're stupid, their opinions don't matter. It's just the clash between the opposites. So you might think you're this person that has been created, but you might be a person that was just manufactured. And I want you to think about that again, manufactured and created. You can create yourself. Manufactured means that you were just put together. If you were that manufactured self, that mindset, of course you're going to, look at the majority of people and say, well, this is the right thing to do. But when you create yourself, you're going to be separating yourself from the crowd. And there's going to be a lot of anchors in your life. There's going to be a lot of people telling you that you need to stop, that you need to change your accent, that you need to do this instead of that. And those people are going to be those toxic individuals that are going to stop you from your true glory. The conversation that you and I had is overcoming that obstacle to step onto that path of our glorious self. And one of the things I love to do at the end of the podcast is to get some final words from you, a takeaway, if you would call it, that you want the audience to walk away with from this episode. And then I want you to tell the audience where they can find you.
Okay. Takeaway words. Well, here's an expression I came up with first to apply to myself, and then now I use it with my patients. And it's never waste a bad experience. And because I look back and all my transformations were preceded by really bad experience. And some people, like you're talking about, can sort of are able to consciously create themselves and not have a disaster. But with it seems like my destiny is to learn from disaster, learn from mistakes. And so I attract patients again who have complex conditions and that nobody knows what to do with them. And some of them come when they're completely stripped. I mean, they have lost their income, they've lost their friends because the friends think they're hypochondriacs. Even the family thinks that they're hypochondriacs, and they have nothing left. And I say, and they know it's not hollow words because they know I'm talking through my own experience. I say, this is your chance. You've been stripped down. You have nobody left in your life. You have a chance to make friends that are really meaningful to you and supportive of you. And you have a chance to create a life that's in alignment with your soul's longing. This is your chance. This is your chance. And then I sometimes say, be sure to take notes because maybe you'll end up being a coach or a writer or something. Take notes on what you're experiencing and never waste this bad experience. So that's one thing I say. Another thing I say all the time is this too shall pass. And it's like a mantra that's very comforting. And another thing I have on my website is a picture of me dancing. Below it says dancing for joy in spite of it all. And in spite of it all, it's like, I've had other disasters too. That's why my eyes don't work together. I was hit by a snowboarder and had brain damage and had to have brain surgery. And I had to train myself to find joy in spite of it all, even if, the migraines and the impaired vision and so forth. I thought, if I'm going to go on living, I have to figure out how to find joy and rewire myself so I can find joy in like an ant walking across the floor or the shape of a cloud or something. And I've gotten to be, my brain's really well trained now. So I seem like I'm happy all the time, even though things aren't going right.
And how can people find you?
I am in the process of redoing a website where it's going to be strictly the books that I've written, the two memoirs, and then I have two more books I'm writing. And that's Erica Elliott MD.com. That's EricaElliott.com. And then I have a blog site that people might really benefit from. It's a mixture of excerpts from the many memoirs, but the most interesting part is the blogs on medicine because they're information that the average person will never find out from their doctors, never. And so I think they'll find that really useful. And it's all about controversial topics like statins and so forth, mammograms, etc. It's Musings, Memoir, and Medicine. Musings with an S, Musings, Memoir, and Medicine, all one word.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram. So that's where they can find me.
Perfect. And I'll make it easy for everyone. All the links are going to be in the description box below so they can easily check you out, learn more about the work that you're doing, reach out to you, inquire about getting your book, get your book, buy your book, learn about your book, and dive into the world that we're not told about. Because it's easy to, follow the path that is given to us, but it takes some work if we want to figure out how we truly want to live. And when you do that task, everything starts to change in your life. And it typically is for the better. So I want to thank you so much, Erica, for coming on, spending some time and telling us your story and talking about your work.
You're a great coach.
Thank you.
Maybe I should refer patients to you.